Force Revolution.
Hello and welcome back to Inconvenient Vedic Truths. So this one I'm going to talk about Vedic culture. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedascha sarvam ham eva vedya, Vedantakrit veda eva jaham. By all the Vedas I am to be known. In fact, I am compiler of Vedanta, I am the knower of the Vedas. So Vedic culture means Krishna culture. What's happened now is that culture has become largely lost. So what do people in India generally refer to their culture as? Hinduism. But Hindu, the word, is just a mispronunciation of the word Sindhu from the river. So saying all the people on the other side of that river are Hindus, it's a bit like in Sydney saying that look over the harbour, they're North Shore people. Of course, people on the North Shore are all sorts of different people. So the very term Hinduism is very vague, and it encompasses all sorts of traditions or sub-traditions, not necessarily specific to what the original culture was. So there's all kinds of different worshippers there. Some people will worship the supreme god. Some people will worship Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. Some will worship Surya, the sun god. Some will worship Ganesh, the son of Shiva, or Shiva himself, etc. And oftentimes the people are worshipping these things not necessarily for spiritual liberation, but for material gain. So people often go to these devatas to worship for material gain rather than worshipping the original, the supreme personality, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. So behind me we can see there's 3 or 4 Indians are playing cricket. So nothing wrong with cricket in itself, but it's ironic because here I am, an Englishman practicing ancient Indian culture, doing yoga, pranayama, mantra meditation, and speaking on the Vedas. And then we've got people from that culture, born in that culture, supposedly, well, they've adopted English culture, so it's like a role reversal here. And if you ask them what their culture was, then they probably would say Hindu, assuming they're not Muslim. But what would that mean if you actually ask people? Well, what does that mean? If you were to explain to, say, the common man in the street what Hinduism is, well, I think anyone would find it quite difficult, really. You know, in a nutshell, you'd probably just be, we've got all sorts of different gods, endless gods or forms of goddesses, and just pick the one you like. Pick the one you like and just worship that. But obviously there's a hierarchy, just like in the government there's a hierarchy. There's also a universal hierarchy, and all these devatas and goddesses, etc. They all have their place, the respective place, and it all ends up at the top of the hierarchy is Bhagavan, that is Krishna himself. So if you recognize the hierarchy, then you understand what all the different gods, demigods are. You understand all of them and their positions, but in not knowing that knowledge, and that's what's happened, that knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, etc., it's largely lost. So people will be going to these temples not really realizing well, what the purpose is, to go back to the source, but just going to remain in the cycle of samsara in the material world, just getting temporary benefits. You're not actually aiming towards the goal. You're going to get things which are going to really just keep you entangled and trapped. So that's not the purpose for these things. So you can worship these devatas, but if you worship them separately from the Supreme God, then it's a bit like bribing a government official to get what you want rather than going through the proper channels. And anything that you can get from these devatas, you can get from the Supreme Lord himself. So that's a very roundabout way. And also those devatas can't give you the liberation. If you understand the actual purpose is to get out of the the cycle of samsara, repeated birth and death, then you won't be able to retain it by then. They themselves are bound up in that cycle, so they won't be able to award that to you. You need to go to the person that is liberated. So Vishnu or Krishna, Vishnu, Tattva, any of those forms, we understand from the Vedas that those forms, they are able to liberate you because they are eternally situated. But if you're situated anywhere within this material world, even if you're in a higher level like Svargaloka, then yeah, all you can do is really elevate yourself up to that. But it's like a merry-go-round. If you go higher up in the planetary system, then eventually, your pious credit runs out, like your bank balance goes down to zero, and then you come back down. So it says Shine Punya Marchalokam Vishanti, that in Bhagavad Gita, once the pious credit runs out, then you fall back down to the planet of birth and death. So you haven't really achieved anything but repeated birth and death by doing that. It's just a very roundabout way. And then you're back to square one. You're back to where we started. So if we don't make some progress, even gradual progress towards the ultimate goal of connecting back up with the source, with Bhagavan, then we choose to remain sort of stuck in this cycle, the cycle of miseries. And so the living entity is looking for pleasure. We're always trying to avoid pain and looking for pleasure, but there's very limited pleasure on the material platform, just the temporary sense gratification. That's not going to cut it. So we're looking for the Ananda, the bliss. But if we don't connect to the source of that bliss, then we're not actually getting it. There's no real Ananda or bliss in the material world. The closest thing would be sort of sexual satisfaction, very temporary sort of feeling of elation. Or people think that intoxication is bliss, but that's ignorance. They have that saying that ignorance is bliss, but no, ignorance isn't bliss. But when you're ignorant, when you're intoxicated, then you might feel like it's blissful. You might feel blissfully happy, completely drunk or bombed out on heroin or whatever. But it's not actually bliss for someone who's actually in a happy, blissful state. You see that as being horrible. But in ignorance, we might think that is bliss, just like someone sleeping in all day, just sleeping around and just dreaming. It's not actually blissful. We're getting more in ignorance. We should limit how much sleeping we do, regulate it, and not have, huge amounts. Same with everything, same with eating. You can't get that much pleasure from eating more than just a regular meal. Yeah, you enjoy your meal. But if you think that you want to enjoy more and more, then you're going to just become greedy and you're going to become unhealthy and fat, and then you're going to actually create more misery. So that's the irony, is that we're trying to enjoy material pleasures. We end up suffering more miseries, unfortunately. It's a bit like a trap. So the only way out of this trap really is to get your pleasure from a spiritual source. We have to learn from the authority, from the Vedic text, the wisdom of the sages of the past that know much more than we do, much better than we do, what's going on, and how to actually be happy. And that is the goal. Everyone is trying that, unless you're sadistic and you just enjoying some kind of pain, and even that, you're still trying to enjoy. But most people, sane people, are searching for pleasure, but that pleasure is very limited and very temporary. So the original Vedic culture directs us towards the source of all that pleasure. So actually the name Rama means the reservoir of all pleasure. So these are different names of the Supreme, of God or controller, the Ishvara. The reservoir of all pleasure. So and everyone is actually, in one sense, everyone's connecting to God, even if you're an atheist, because if all the energy around is all emanated from that same source, then you're also connected to that. But this is the external energy. So rather than going to the source or the internal energy, we're just playing around in the external energy. And that's why we're suffering. Just like a child that will touch the fire and it will burn, because it doesn't realize. So we're playing around in the material nature. We don't realize we're getting more entangled in it. by doing things, and then we're like, oh, that hurt. And so sometimes we learn from experience. All of us make bad decisions, and often we learn from that experience. Better to learn without the experience, but sometimes we need the experience, and then we suffer, and then we realize actually that wasn't a good course. Yeah, so it can set us back on course in a sense. The misery or the anxiety it can actually wake us up in a sense to bring us back to the right course. But if we don't learn that, then we can again and again. And so we really need guidance. Without spiritual knowledge, we will end up just making the same mistake again. So it's very crucial that the world has to regain this culture, which used to be all over the world, used to be across the whole world, the Vedic culture, and there's remnants of it in all different places. But now it's become so lost, and there's maybe fragments of it left, mainly in India. But even that's becoming lost. People are losing their culture and just adopting other cultures that have come in and invaded, and then you just adopt their culture. Well, that means you've been defeated if you're following their culture. If you're looking to the West and you're just building skyscrapers and chasing technology, then no, you've actually already lost your culture. So we need to reverse that. So that is going on in a lot of ways. A lot of people are realising that is not bringing satisfaction and pleasure. But it has to happen more and more. Otherwise, we're going on a more destructive kind of course of technology. Technology is just going to enslave us more rather than actually helping us. We're going to be so caught up in it, and we're going to actually lose our humanity. We're going to lose our soul. We may gain the whole world, but we're going to lose our soul and our soul's connection to the Supreme Soul. And we're going to just simply wither and die in that sense. Spiritually, we're going to completely lose contact with Source and suffer. But if straight away, if we reconnect to that Source, then immediately we feel the pleasure again. We feel the satisfaction and the connection, and then we can try and spread that to other people also, and then the whole course of the world can change. Otherwise, materially speaking, it doesn't matter what we do, trying to rearrange things politically, we end up creating the same mistake. We're creating more problems than we're solving. So I think everyone should really just take this process and learn the Vedic culture and take up the processes given in there, and the whole world could be happy if we had that. If everyone understood and realised, then we can really change the course of history. Okay, thank you. Jai Sri.